Hello, good afternoon.
Hey, Dom, I'm just kind of above on the log here. So ignore me.
All right, no worries.
Uh, this is more just this is a show.
Hello.
Hello,
Hi, Greg. Hi, Drum. Hi, Sandy.
hello.
Hey, everyone. I was telling Dom earlier that I'll just stay out of the way just as.
Don't worry, Greg. You have lots of experience in this area as well. So if you see us going down the garden path, please chip in. But
Well,
I am very happy with the progress that Dom has been making.
yeah, usually I'll just correct you separately, but if I need to make a suggestion, I will.
Yeah, no, go for it. This is a working group after all. Okay, let me find our paper trail. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Justus.
How are you today?
I'm doing good. You?
I'm all right, thank you. Let me check in if I can get hold of our lead. Dom, we'll give it another 2 minutes and then we'll get started. But I would very much love for you, if you could, I mean, don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but maybe share your experiences that you've had so far, because it sounds like you've actually made some real progress.
Yes, I did. Thank you. It's a great learning experience for me.
Excellent. I'm hoping it was also helpful. Claude, Gemini, or ChatGPT, or whichever one was riding shotgun with you. I find these are incredibly useful in helping to figure things out.
Yes, it was. For the record, I was using Gemini, sometimes ChatGPT, but yeah. Interestingly, I have a record of the chats. That was an interesting development.
That's fantastic. I'm able to do things nowadays that I would never have thought would be possible for me. There's such a learning curve to be able to learn new technologies from scratch, and it's really helpful having a an AI assistant almost as a mentor because they already know how to do a lot of the technical things. You can just ask it.
Yeah, that's true. For me, it was helpful because it's like starting with the example. Show me first before I
Yeah,
before I have to wade through the documentation. Yeah.
no, no, exactly. That's also sort of a preferred way of learning for me is like find somebody, show me how it should be done, and then, show me how we can do it here is a very useful approach. The other thing that I also like to do is to be able to drill down on a concept because you can easily ask it if it tries to explain something to you. I'll ask it to explain it to me like I'm five. And then it uses really simple language and really simple examples for me to be able to understand the concept.
Right. Same here.
Okay. We are at 5 o'clock, or at 5 minutes past. So what we're going to do, I haven't heard from Fadi yet, but let's kick off for today. And then maybe just as a sort of a recap to start, Dom, do you maybe want to quickly share what you have been up to? And I know we've had a bit of a conversation on the side, and that's why I wanted to use this opportunity maybe just to feed back to everybody, because you've been actually doing a deployment, which is fantastic. So if you don't mind, take it away.
Sure. No. I'd be happy to. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for giving me the floor. Yeah, I think let me share that with you first here. Okay. I'll share the tab. Okay, so it's this one over here. Yeah, there were some things going on, so we had I basically had 2 weeks to work on this one. So I put together this. I just put this out right now. There were some chats that we had in Slack. So in effect, I actually put together a Helm chart. Uh, it's this one over here. It's currently on my private. It's currently on my personal GitHub, but it's public. So in case people want to look at it, so it's this one over here. Okay. What I did here was actually to take the full stack Docker Tazama, and then I ran that through Gemini, and out of that, with few sessions, Q&A back and forth, I ended up with this one. I think to start with, this was a helpful document for me because this broke down the different services into different
Excellent.
categories. Yeah, and in a way it wasn't so obvious initially, but I think to start, if we lay it out this way, it was even simpler in the previous version, but it breaks it down into infrastructure, which is basically Postgres, Valkey, and NATS, and then the core services are over here, right? And how they all link with each other. The output is over here, so it's really just the chart. And then the templates are over here. Okay, so config maps, secrets, and then as you saw, it was broken down into infrastructure, core, and the rules. So I took out authentication. I also took out some of the relays. So it's basically work to do, right? So sorry, I hope it's coming into you, right? You're seeing the screen. Okay.
Yes, I
All
can
right.
see the screen.
Yes.
I'm following.
All right. Okay. Um, yeah. So this is the Helm chart structure. I've put here some instructions on how to on how to run it. Yeah, and yeah, this uh, I've tested this one on an internal Kubernetes, which is almost plain vanilla. Yeah, so we can decide what to what to do with this one. There's a few things that I did learn from doing this. So anyway, that one works. I had to play a lot of whack-a-mole, trying to get the correct configuration. But again, the AI was pretty helpful for doing that. Now, next one was configuration. So um, after deploying the Helm chart. So to deploy the Helm chart, I just needed I picked up the images from Docker Hub, and a lot of the work was actually finding the right environment variables. Okay, and to get this one working, I also had to pre-populate. Okay, I had to set up the database with the tables, but not necessarily with any content. Right. So after that was
Yeah.
done, I had to do some configuration for the rules, typologies, and network map. So this is where I ran into a problem. It was working when I used the I used the admin service to set it up. Okay, But
Perfect.
then today I realized, so I think late last week I mentioned that something still wasn't working right. And today I realized that sending to the admin service, uh, it was recording the incorrect map. Sorry, it wasn't
Ah,
recording the rules correctly. So there was a problem with. I can point it out more specifically later, but there were some missing parameters if I use the admin service. So today I ended up changing it to just using the Postgres configuration script, which is again adapted from uh, the full
from
stack Docker. All right.
right.
So and then I got it working. And then uh, Leslie was testing. So I also adapt. Yeah, I'm not so used with Postman. So it was clearer to me and to my colleagues to just use curl. So I ended up
Yeah.
translating Postman into into these uh, curl. These are basically curl scripts and some templates, and so that's the testing. So in effect, that's what I did. And there's some additional notes that I added here. I think the key one here is probably would be helpful once this is up. Okay, well, getting the containers up and running isn't that's with a bit of help from AI. Okay, so more or less we solved that problem. But I think the bigger challenge was what is the correct way to configure this one, and if we can do a
Mm.
test that can be automated. So yeah, that's basically what I did.
Okay, I'm going to just quickly make a note here. Notes. One thing that you are pointing out, I'm going to add here as a maybe a task for us.
Should I stop sharing so you can share your screen? So for the notes.
If you're done, I didn't want to rush you. I'm just
I'm
typing
basically
some
done.
stuff
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
side.
I'll stop sharing now.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Cool. Let me share up here and then I can talk about this. All right. So a couple of things. So it seems like you actually created your own Helm charts from scratch, right? These are from the ground up, specifically focused on building the deployment according to the new components and also only for Rule 901 and Rule 902. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. But in effect, I really translated the full stack Docker
Yeah.
setup into Helm. Yeah.
Okay. Via Helm, constructed from which is great. And then the thing here, add as a deliverable that maybe we can talk about. And I think that's probably useful. It's like a non-development trivial documentation exercise, I think. So at the end of the Helm, just also to be able to tell people if your Helm is now up and running and you want to make sure that everything is working, here is a test that you can run to check it. The challenge with a test like that typically is you are now creating information that will become part of your transaction history, which isn't a problem if you create it with test data. What is typically recommended is that you use a specific transaction code. So the ISO 20 or the ISO organization have a test code called XTS that you can use to test transaction information in a way that doesn't reflect in real production financial systems. So most of them have like an XTS exclusion. So as long as you ring fence those transactions with an XTS currency code, you should be fine. And that data can then live in the system. What you don't necessarily want to do is to test the system and then have to flush data out of your database that's now test data. But we can get to that. So I think that's a sort of a useful value add out of that process. And thank you for the feedback. It's actually really great that you were able to deploy the system using Helm as an alternative to what we're currently doing in Docker Compose. I think that's already very promising and hopefully something that we can leverage. So you are now amongst the other experts in the room, which would be Brian, who has done this at IPSL, and Foley, who has done sort of a similar thing, or at least his team has at Cybran under Foley's supervision. Okay. So, any questions for Dom?
Yes, I've got a couple. Sorry, I'm late to the party, first of all. But then secondly, I missed the part where how do you populate, for example, the database in the in your Helm chart? So setting up all the default rule config and topology config for rule 1 and 2.
Right. Yeah. So, in effect, it's actually okay. It's actually two parts. Okay. I'll share my screen again if that's all right. I think this will be.
Yeah.
It won't take that long. And yeah. So fully. Over here is. Oh, sorry. Missed my. Okay. Hold on. Where was that? Yeah. So it's the Helm. Okay. The Helm chart. Just to get the Helm chart up and running. Okay, so at the very least, I needed the within the Postgres within the Postgres chart YAML. So you can see here that
Oh.
it adapted create SQL from full stack Docker. Okay, but this is just to create the tables,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and at this point, there's no data, but you have tables with the columns, and this gets you to the point where the containers are running without any crash loopbacks, right?
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So, and then the next stage, and here is I actually ended up splitting this into two parts because I have here, um, okay, I have here another repo with my notes. Okay, so so initially I thought to use talking to the admin service API. Uh, yeah, so this was my initial experiment. So it actually did load the configurations, but I realized that it was loading 901 incorrectly. So 901 here, I had parameters max query range, but after doing this, checking the database, this actually turned out empty. So it parameters without the max query range.
Huh.
So that's why, so I can file it as a bug. Okay, if you can tell me where to put it. So trying to figure that out today. So and I figured it out when I saw that hey there was something wrong here. So I went back to using test config. I joined the two SQL scripts from Full Stack Docker. One was the zero base SQL, and the next one was I think the uh, Docker, okay, one of the Docker Hub, Docker Hub public, right? So it's basically these two. It's verbatim, okay, and then I just inserted it using PSQL. So yeah,
Okay.
and this is the part where I got it working. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that does answer my question. So with the reason I'm asking is because I also had to figure out how to do that from scratch, and it would be nice to actually have it up and running, especially the insert statements, which you have that separately with the curl. So I managed to get the Helm chart to actually execute the scripts by using the entry point function. So after you've started up a container, you have an entry point that your whatever it is, your Kubernetes will actually run after your uh, pod has started up successfully. So in your entry point, you can actually specify when it should run, and this one runs after the Postgres is ready command succeeds. And then
Mhm.
after that happens, then you have an entry point where you can run a command, and that command will then create all of your SQL. And after that, it's also able to insert all of your information. So yeah, that's why I was just wondering how you managed to do that.
Yeah, I think I ended up using some of the entry points as well, but not. I ended up using it in the what do you call this? In the setup for the services, the core services. Yeah, because it needed to be sure. Okay, it needed to wait for Postgres to be ready.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quick question there, right? So when you are spinning up the Postgres container itself, there are a couple of health check statuses and a readiness status that has been built into Postgres that you can poll. Does Helm actually check the health and the readiness of the container to be able to then take that specific next step to do the sort of load the database and so on? Does it interact with the running container?
That's a good question. I have to ask the AI. But in any case,
Yes.
yeah.
So it's
All
got
right.
3 different metrics. So the one is the liveliness. The startup probe is the first one. It says if it started up successfully. After
Uh-huh.
that, you can have the liveliness probe that will basically run continuously to make sure that to always check if the container is ready. And if that liveliness probe fails 5 seconds or 5 times within a period, then it would actually trigger a restart of the pod. And then the third one is the readiness probe, which will also run after the startup probe. So after the startup probe is successful, the readiness probe will start running to make sure when is this component actually ready to accept commands. And then after that, the liveliness will run continuously. So that's the 3 metrics I know of that Kubernetes uses out of the box. Yeah,
I'm
as
sorry,
is
what's the
highlighting.
third one? I see you've used 2 here. So liveliness, readiness, and
Liveliness, readiness, and startup. So the startup one will just run initially to make
okay.
sure if it actually started up correctly. So for Postgres, for example, the 3 of them is typically the same thing
Hmm.
because Postgres is a single thing that runs and it starts up and it's only ready when the whole thing is ready. So you basically use the pgs ready command and you specify the user. And you can use that for all 3.
All right. And then at that point you can set up the next step to either load the databases and tables and everything else or do the
Exactly, yeah.
configuration or so on. Yeah. I mean, initially I think the question here around setup is typically the database backend tables and everything else do need to be set up at create time, right? That makes sense. But my preference here would almost be to say that yes, we can also create a configuration at that point, but it would probably be better to create that configuration using the admin services API, which also gives you an opportunity to make sure that it's working. It feels for me the configuration should be through the proper services and not try and inject that straight into the database in the back end. How does everybody feel about that? What's preferred? Where's the line between setup during installation and configuration during operation?
Yeah, I feel that way is actually better. That's how it ended up for me. The minimum was just to set up the tables, but they can be empty, or at least there
Yeah.
wasn't so far. There wasn't any that the other depending the under depending containers needed, other than just to know that the table existed. So it also, I think that also it adds a separation that, hey, the services are up, and here, this is how you, okay, however you want to deploy this. Okay, it's this next step.
I think the question is just how. So, Dom, how would those curl scripts run? Does someone have to manually do it, or can you automate that
Ah,
somehow?
yeah. That's also a question. I mean, on my end, just do because I'm running. I'm running this one and basically testing and learning at the same time. Uh, I would prefer to get, but this is just from a test mode. I would prefer to run the scripts automatically and also do the tests automatically, right? But production would be different. I would think. I think in a production setup, the assumption would be that this is already tested, and so therefore, the whole deploy should end up with the cluster, the Tazama cluster that you want, configuration included. So yeah, but I just think that there should be some logical break in between.
Yeah, so
A
I
quick
think
question,
that's
maybe
that's
to follow
the
on.
yeah. Just on your previous question, the answer is if you want it automated, then you can't have it a curl command. You set it up using the entry point, and it will by default seed your default set of configuration or whatever configuration you have in your environment. So if you want it automated, you make use of the entry point. But what is nice with Helm is you can control that with a value. So I've got a value that you can set up to say seed transaction data, and then a path to SQL files that you want to seed. So then if you run the Helm command, you can switch that off. If you want it on the test environment, dev environment, you can have that command on. And then if you want it for production, you can have it off. And then you can
Uh,
have some other means of seeding the data.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my own thought is I'd still want it automated but separate, because I think inserting it within the Helm chart makes it harder to pull out later on. Uh, that's just my general thought. I mean, setting the tables is okay, but actually seeding the configuration, I think, would already introduce something into the mix that would make it harder to take out later on. Just a thought.
So maybe if I could sort of, I think I'm aligned with your suggestion. On the basis that if we are giving people Helm charts, we can't predict the configuration that they would want, which means that we are giving them something out of the box that they have to then modify first, right? The database tables and the setting up of the environment, that doesn't require modification of the Helm files or the SQL scripts. The configuration might. But then to add to that, if we are saying that we could potentially automate this through a separate configuration process, what would that automation look like? And I want to maybe just recall, Foley, and I don't know how relevant that is here, but we used to take all of those Postman scripts that we used to use for configuration purposes in ArangoDB back in version 2, and then we ran them out of what is the CLI that comes with Postman? It was, what's it called? I can't remember now.
Was it Newman?
Newman, yes, that's the one, right? So we used to do a lot of the configuration via Newman because Newman was a tool that was available. Is Newman something that can work here? Or is that, how did we
Newman
used to do that? How did we
Newman
drive
is
that?
specifically something that can run Postman files. So
Yeah.
if we
So
decide we want to stick with Postman files, then yes, Newman is your way to automate it.
yeah,
But the way DOM has it currently is just by pure curl commands, which
of course,
means you
right.
stick with default HTTP and you don't need to install things like Newman and or Postman.
The reason I would gravitate towards Newman here, I mean, we can always change it because I'm not a big fan of Postman to start with. But all of those scripts already exist in Postman. If I take my lesson from what Dom did, is Dom had to rewrite all of those scripts into shell scripts um, that can then drive curl. So in theory, you could still do the same thing because the admin services API is open. So you could provide users with a bunch of shell scripts that might be able to do the same, or bash scripts, or whatever the case is. Those are just slightly more difficult to maintain, and they are yet again something extra. So if we wanted to use what we already had, we could use Newman. If we wanted to pivot to something different that is more universal and liberates us from the Postman ecosystem, that's also fine. That's just a decision we need to make and work that we have to do. So which way do we want to go there?
Well, I think whichever tool you decide doesn't really matter. I think the question is, do we want to stick to pure SQL where insert statements work, or do we want to use something else? And if we use something like curl, that's something else, because now we want to talk to the admin servers instead of talking to Postgres directly. So if we want to go to the admin servers, then we have to unpack how complicated the things are, and if something like pure curl will do the job, or do we want to stick to something like Postman, where you now need to install another tool that you have to understand and interpret and get all of your seeding in Postman. So if we're saying my environment is going to look different to yours, then I have to modify the Postman scripts before I can automatically run them with Newman.
Or any scripts, right? Because if it's SQL, you might still want to modify the SQL to meet your specific environment. So let's assume that modification is inevitable, right? Unless somebody really wants the off-the-shelf experience, they would apply the configuration without modification, and that's fine. That's possible, right? That's the most basic thing. Whatever more they would want would require some kind of modification, whether it's in Postman or whether it's in SQL files, or as Dom had them in YAML files. What do we think would be the best process here? And I'm very comfortable just upfront, right? If we are saying that we don't need a specific tool to do this, and we want to pick something universal, like make it SQL, right? Because that's the language that Postgres is talking anyway. It's just not the language that the admin services API talks. That's JSON, right? So maybe not SQL, but maybe just the JSON documents, right? All we now need is a way to fire them into the admin services API when it's running. So these are, I think, currently our options, right? I can share because, right? So if we are saying we are proposing to separate the setup of the DB tables from the configuration via maybe potentially the admin services, right? Maybe this is the first thing that we need to decide if we are in agreement, right? I like this as two separate steps. How does everybody else feel about this?
I think context is a bit important. So for first-time use, I might have a different answer than I want to promote my dev to UAT or UAT to prod, right? So if we're saying first-time setup, we want to follow the same approach as promotion, then we just need to figure out, if I'm going from dev to UAT, I already have my config in Postgres, and now I need to get that out of Postgres so that I can put it into UAT. So how do I do that?
Right. That is a great question. Can I propose a solution for that, right?
Yeah.
So your UAT environment, I would assume, would also be wrapped in an admin services API, and you should be able to literally pull the same data out of the UAT environment that will be in the format required by your production environment. And you have an additional benefit there is you are now also bound by the security protocol of your production environment. So all of the data that you're submitting via the API are going to be audit trailed based on the authenticated user that's going to be doing that work. The data is going to be appropriately time-stamped, and it's going to be appropriately validated at the front door, right? Because you don't have to worry that you are injecting invalid data straight into the database. You have created deliberately a boundary of trust. The trust boundary is the admin services API. So I would not recommend that you promote configuration information from your environments into production any other way than the admin services API. But that's my opinion on the table.
Yeah, so with those constraints, now we can talk about what do we want to do. I am not opposed to the idea of using it separately. So having your Helm charts and your schema setup done in a different way than your data. Because that's basically what you're talking about here, right? How do we seed the data?
Yeah.
So data seeding can be done separate to the deployment.
And that has also been our philosophy at
process.
Tazama. Yeah, exactly. Our philosophy has been to create tools to allow people to use services to do that. We don't want people to interact with the database directly anymore. One, it's a security risk, and two, it's a pain. So
I'm also seeing two sides to it. There's the DB migration part where you do the insert, you create the tables, and then there's the data seeding. I would be okay with automating the data migration part and then maybe do the seeding via the admin service now.
Just repeat for me, please, Brian. I wasn't sure that I was following.
Okay. I was saying when with regard to the data, there's the migration part and there's also the data seeding. So I was saying that I'd be okay with automating the data migration, make it part of the deployment process, maybe have a job to do that. And then now there's the data that you want to see.
Okay.
Now you could maybe do that via the admin service.
I'm going to add that here as sort of because when you're talking about migration, you're talking about installing Tazama and then bringing historical data into the system?
Not the data, but just the required tables, for example.
Where would you be migrating them from?
Okay, in that case, though, you'd have the SQL script that will be executed to create the tables.
Yeah. So for me, the two steps, and I think maybe we were focusing on the configuration here, but you are correct. There's also a step for the database tables themselves. Now, because these tables are kind of fixed for the specific version of the system that you're deploying, you can set up the tables along with the rest of the platform. So when you're deploying the database and the database is up and running, you can then immediately deploy the tables and the databases directly into the database. You don't have to wait until later. That can happen immediately. And in fact, it probably should happen immediately because there may be other Tazama services that start to depend on the databases existing before they will be able to do before they will be ready or before they will be healthy. They may need to connect to their specific tables up front. So it's probably a dependency for the database tables themselves to be deployed. The configuration part is only necessary before you start running transactions through the system. So that can happen in a separate step. My motivation for making that a separate step is because that step is likely to be customer specific. So I don't necessarily want to prescribe configuration information in the setup. I might want to do that as a separate second step, but also, as Dom pointed out, I think, as Foley also suggested, automate it, right? So you can parameterize that with your configuration and then have a routine or a process run that for you. That should be possible. So for me, it's like I wanted to make sure that we are comfortable that the setup piece should be part of the Helm deployment and the configuration piece should be a separate second step.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Anybody else feel that that is not the right way to go? If you do want to disagree, you're still welcome to do that. But for now, I'm going to flag that as agreed, right? And then constraint the admin services at the trust boundary provides authentication, validation, and audit. So for me, it would be better to do to apply the configuration via the admin services or the admin service API. Right? Now the question is how? Right? So currently, so the core object or the format that we need to get to in whatever way we decide to do this is the JSON format. Which is basically just text, right? So in theory, you could put this into the system through curl. You can create all of these as separate JSON documents. All you need is a firing mechanism to send this into the API as an authenticated user. How would you guys recommend we do this?
Well, since it's a manual step, you will need an authenticated user details. So when it's automated, you have your default things that you set in your Helm chart when you do a deployment. So I've got my username and password. But now, if I'm a user that needs to manually run this, you need to find your username and password that is able to do this deployment, which now you need to find so that you can do your authentication call, so that you can deploy your data.
Which brings me to another question, and I think this is where you're going, right? Is we haven't set up our key clock yet.
Yep.
And key clock itself also comes with a configuration file out of the box to at least set up the roles and the user groups, if not the users. I mean, I don't know to what extent we can parameterize that as well. So somewhere here, I'm going to make a note of it later because we do need to talk about it, is the deployment is easy. But we do need to figure out how Keycloak is going to be set up. So at this point, yes, you need an authenticated user to be able to send a configuration into the admin services API. And also, I think the value here, and I think somebody mentioned it earlier as well, is I think it was you, Foley. If you are talking about an ongoing operational process, this is the first time that you are setting up configurations in the system. But however you are doing it now, you are probably also going to do on an ongoing operational basis if the configurations have to change. So if I want to change the rule configurations or topologies or the network map or anything else, you are going to probably follow the same process. And if we can create a process here that is reusable, it would be useful to help people manage their system later. So at this point, we want to do that initial configuration, but it should be similar to a normal operational configuration as well. So maybe just as a sort of an aside.
So your how is by the keycloak realms. As you've got it, the keycloak realm you can export from. We can ship with the default one that has your default CMS users and whatever TRS, all the default users. But then if you've got set up in UAT that you want to take to prod, then you can decide to take the users or not. But by default, we want to ship with the realm so that you have all of the default Tazama users, right?
Yeah. Maybe not the users. I suppose it would be useful because otherwise you're forcing people to do that work up front. Like pick the user that's going to be interacting with the admin services over here to set up your configuration. So how would you do this if you were actually deploying this in a new environment? Would you want to have some prefabbed users in there, or would you actually want to start with just the basic roles and the groups, and you're going to set up your own first user when you run the system for the first time? How would you prefer to use this?
It's very valuable to have all the Tazama users created out of the box, in my opinion.
When you say users, you actually mean literally the users, not the roles and the groups, right?
Yes, even the users, because the default users are what you actually need. The roles don't do anything by themselves. You need to set up users. So then you have to go manually create a whole bunch of users in order to use the system. So you have to manually go into keycloak now and do stuff. So what would be the reason why we would not want to share the users?
The biggest reason I can think of is because people forget to change the defaults. And then you go into production with the system that has all of the Tazama default users in it with their default passwords. Or, is there a way that we could probably, because you can seed the passwords as part of the realm file. So you just need to you need to parameterize the passwords in the realm file from some sort of central secrets repository.
If I'm not mistaken, you cannot. So a keycloak, you have a user and you have a credential. And I
Yes.
think that keycloak does not have a means of actually sharing the credentials. So after I import your default Helm file and set up your Helm, I have to go into keycloak and set a credential.
You don't have to. So all of these credentials, if I rebuild the system, all of these users have the passwords that are currently assigned in the beta. It's in the realm file. I think they're hashed because I think you use the keycloak, what you call it, the private key file to hash them. I'm not sure, but these passwords are all preset.
Oh, I see some of them are. Oh, I see. Sorry, I was looking at the JSON file for the full stack Docker, and not all of them do. So the top few I looked at didn't, but then I saw there are some with the credentials. Yes.
Yeah. I think that file might be slightly out of date, but if you look at the export, I don't know if the export is available to you, but I can export this to you, and you can actually see the password is in there. But yes, you could preset a password and you can roll it out. The risk obviously is if you do that, then people will forget to change them, or they'll just leave them as the default, and that's how you end up with systems that has admin password in it as a password, which, to be fair, is already the default password for Keycloak, so it's not particularly helpful. So yes, we can do that. I mean, but coming back to the question then is like, how would you guys prefer to do it? What do we recommend here? So including the default users is great because you also get examples of how we think those users should be set up.
Yeah, I suggest you ship with everything. The less manual stuff someone has to do when they first use Tazama, the easier. And
Right.
again, when I'm going from UAT to prod, I will have to do something different.
Yeah. So just as a question here,
maybe we could keep.
yeah, Brian.
I was saying maybe we could keep the users and include a disclaimer that they should ensure to change the passwords or something like that. Because as you mentioned, it can also serve as a good guide on how to set up the users, and it's a lot of users.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can in the guide you can literally say to exclude the users tag in the keycloak RAM file. So if they want to deploy without the users, they can just delete the users tag in the RAM file.
Okay. So yes, there are a number of different users. Question I have here is, for example, the user that Tazama would set up that would give you access to loading configuration information via the admin services API is this one over here, right? So if the goal would be to be able to link the configuration of the system to a specific user, that goal won't be able to be met here, because this is just what you're actually then linking it to is the person who has access to this generic user profile, not a person, a specific person. Does that matter to anyone for the first time configuration?
I think it matters to me in the sense of it being good.
Easy for first time configuration. So first time config is basically just I'm okay with that. That doesn't matter. It's the ongoing configuration that you probably want to put a specific person's name in here, because you want to know who the people are who are interacting with your system, and they must be responsible for managing and keeping their own credentials a secret. I wouldn't use a shared thing in the future, but sure. I mean, okay, we can do that. Okay, cool. And then here, authenticated user default. Because that user will have the correct permissions.
Yeah, maybe specify with its credentials.
Yeah.
And then in your documentation, you can always say Tazama API client with the default password or Tazama123 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, if there is a way when you are setting up Keycloak to actually parameterize these passwords from some sort of central password so that you can create a strong, unique password out of the box that nobody else knows before you created it, that probably feels a little bit more secure. I don't know if that's possible here.
I tried to do that with Keycloak specifically, but because the Helm file is a JSON file, there's no easy way to parameterize it. If it was a YAML file, then you could parameterize it based on your values.yaml file when you run the Helm chart.
You're going to need to run a script that can do some sort of grep.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Fine, fair enough. Okay. Right. So now we have everything that we need to be able to do the configuration. What method should we follow? We have a JSON document. We need to put the JSON document into the API with an authenticated user.
Why not curl?
I have no reason to veto curl. It does sound like the thing that is the most basic that everybody will have access to. Do we just tell people to use curl? Tell them what the commands are? I think,
Dom?
Dom, you used curl. You were quite happy with it. Brian, how would you want to do that?
Curl would work. Are you looking for a way to automate it as well?
Automation would be nice, right? If you can actually wrap this into, even if it's just a shell script, because literally what you are doing here is a very predictable process. It's literally take this set of JSON files and put this set of JSON files into the rule API, take this set of JSON files, put it into the topology API, take this JSON file and put it into the network map API, and then activate it. Or you don't even need to activate it because the first time setup, you can just post it immediately as an active network map. So that's it. That's the whole process. And you can automate that, I guess, through a shell script the same way that that Dom did. Wrap it 3 different curl statements.
Yeah, that could work. So a shell script running your curl commands.
So the SQL is around 2,200 lines of SQL.
Yeah.
So the SQL contains the raw JSON. So your curl commands would be more or less the same length. So yes, we do not want someone to have to manually run 50 curl commands. So shell script running bash or curl sounds like the best thing to me.
So quick question. Do you have to put that entire JSON object into the curl command, or can you reference a file?
Depends on what you use to run it. If you use a shell script, you can parameterize the shell script to read a file in the same folder.
The rules sit at, the payload for the rules is 1,071. Maybe add another for whichever one of these you want. So another 32. The topology configurations is longer. These are quite big. So that's sitting at 8,500 lines for every topology we currently have in the system. And then the network map, that is sitting at 1,300 lines by itself. The topology configuration is probably the big one.
Yeah, so ideally you can make a JSON files and then your shell script will read the JSON files.
Yeah. Let me go back here. And then we are at time. I do feel like we're a little bit, we spent some more time on how to configure the system than we did how to do the initial deployment. Prefab shell script running curl commands to feed 3 JSON files into 3 endpoints. And that's it. Your system is configured, right? Okay. We are at time, so what I'd like to maybe propose for our next session, which will be next week, is let's have a look at how we can actually put our Helm charts together. So we can maybe start getting a sense of outlining the Helm charts and what they should look like. That would be great. Let me go here quickly. I just want to look.
Well done for getting those Helm charts together, and thank you for sharing, Dom.
Yeah, no, I think that was really amazing progress. So if we look at something like, for example, the on-prem Helm here, one of the things that always astounded me was just how much or how many files there are here. Custom charts, Postgres. It's quite a big tree structure here, all of these files. Maybe in preparation for next week, if everybody can maybe just familiarize themselves with what's already in here and how it works, we can talk about how we can move this towards a like how to fix it or how to update it. Let's not say fix. At least like there's a lot of jobs in here. I think this is probably where most of the complexity comes from.
Yeah, that's the whole
Maybe the
Jenkins
Jenkins
folder.
stuff.
So we
Yeah,
already
the
said we're
Jenkins
not.
stuff.
Are we deploying Jenkins or not?
We did say that we should, but maybe not immediately. So we can baseline the Helm charts based on the containers that are prefabbed, but that same Helm chart should, in theory, also be capable of or deploying a container that has been built through Jenkins. I'm assuming, but for me, it's like the Helm charts are almost now a separate process that should be able to handle either one. I don't know if that means that it's two Helm charts or whether it's one Helm charts that can somehow branch. At this point, I don't know as much about Helm as you guys do. All three of you have done way more work in Helm than I have at this point. But let's look at that next time and see if we can at least outline what our approach and our Helm and deployment architecture is going to look like.
Sounds good.
Cool. Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate you helping us out and showing up for the session. See you all again next week.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Great.
Thanks all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.